Welcome to Podcetera. Each episode is a journey of discovery as we delve into topics that pique our curiosity and yours. We feature in-depth interviews with fascinating individuals who have extraordinary stories to share.
I'm Renee Lego.
And I'm Joelle Ludovich. And this
is Podcetera. Emily Mendez and Timothy Good, welcome to Podcetera. Thanks for joining us.
Could you each tell our audience about yourselves and your background?
I'm originally from Texas. I grew up loving to make movies with my siblings. We would recreate our favorite movies like Jaws and Star Wars, and it fascinated me to put those things together. And I just followed that passion of editing and ended up moving out to LA, studied at the American Film Institute, and kind of got on this path into television. So I've always loved editing and kind of just followed that my whole life. That's kind of, where I come from.
I'm Tim Good. I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois. I was also fascinated by putting things together when I was younger. Slightly different. I didn't do it with movies or whatnot. I did it with Legos, architecture bricks, and also with playing piano of all things. So a combination of those and making like models of aircraft, oddly enough. But it was always about like the details and the process of putting things together and the way that putting things together made a greater whole. So I loved that. And I went to Northwestern University in Chicago, just outside, because I wasn't ready to leave just yet, but I should have been because the weather in Chicago is terrible. But that's what happened. It is what it is. I moved out to LA around 97 and I immediately tried to find work in post-production, and I was able to luckily find a wonderful mentor in Norman Buckley, who is now a director. He's also from Texas. So there's a Texas theme here. It's going along. And he really gave me an enormous amount of craft training that I have been really honored to be able to pass along to everyone I've been lucky enough to have as my assistant editor. And I just kept moving along in television because it was the place where you could edit faster than in features. I was told that early on. It's like, if you want to start editing, TV is the best way. Spread the risk, a lot easier. And that's pretty much it. I've been doing this for 25 years. My God, how did that happen?
I've been in TV for about 7 years. And while we're talking about mentorship, Tim has been a great mentor to me. I worked with Tim. We met while we were working on The Resident and started working together after a couple seasons on that. And then moved on to The Umbrella Academy and then The Last of Us. So we've known each other now for many, many years. And we've been a great duo. And
I love The Resident.
Oh, cool.
Oh, cool.
I love that show. Have you seen it, Joelle?
I have not. I've seen The Umbrella Academy, though.
Nice.
You need to add that to your list.
My watch list.
Since you both mentioned that you were influenced early or had an interest in editing, did you make movies when you were younger or besides Legos? And by the way, I like the Lego reference, me being a Lego as well.
Love it.
List.
Yep.
What creative things did you do when you were younger? Besides Legos, did you make movies? Did you write stories?
I didn't. I honestly did not. What happened for me creatively is I'm doing all this Legos and all these other things. And when I get to high school, my public high school was really lovely, actually. And it had a television studio. And that television studio had an editing system. And this is back in 93 through 97. So we're talking linear, tape to tape. But it was very much like keyboards and very much like playing piano, which was similar to what I'd like to do. And so I immediately started putting images and music together. Images and music. I was obsessed with Twin Peaks at the time, as were we all.
As we all were. Yeah, I was gonna
As
say.
were we all. And so it was like, I would try and replicate. Like, I was like, let me do like the Twin Peaks music and I'll put my own images over it and create something Lynchian, but, for a 15-year-old, which was, obviously not so great. But it still was like, it was fun to be able to try and do what they did. And so creatively, that's where I started that sort of journey of putting things together. And I immediately sort of was told by some people who were in charge, hey, you have a really good aptitude for this. We would like to help bring in some producers and give you some more training. And so that's how that sort of evolved in high school. And then when I went to college afterwards, similar things happened there. Editing became nonlinear in my last year of college. They finally put in digital editing systems. And I had 1 year with that before I had to move. And then after that, it was just moving on from there.
They started putting that in as I was graduating.
Oh,
So I never had that in college, in undergrad. I edited on film and shot on actual celluloid film and did the Steenbeck and edited on a Steenbeck and the mag stock and everything. I loved it. And
yeah.
it wasn't until grad school until I made that transition to, and I started working a little bit and using nonlinear. But
Cool.
anyway, I'm also a fan of Lego building and Renee.
And Renee.
And Renee, like, no.
I'm a fan of Me Too.
Anyway.
Emily, how about you?
Yeah, I've always been drawn to any kind of creative thing. I loved puzzles growing up. I did a lot of puzzles with my grandma and always enjoyed that. And then I was always drawn to pottery. My aunt does a lot of pottery. I did that with her. So yeah, any kind of artistic stuff. But really, video was always the format that I loved. I mean, when I was in high school, I would do anything I could. I went to a very small high school in Texas, and I would cut all the graduation videos, all the banquet videos, anything I could get my hands on to cut, I would do it. There was no class or anything. I just kind of made my own class in a way by doing all that stuff. So
Cool. I didn't know you did pottery. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's like thing I didn't know. That.
I'm very rusty now, but when I was younger, I did a lot.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about Twin Peaks, David Lynch's work. So which editor's work has most influenced either of you and why?
Oh my gosh. That is the question of the century. I'm going to throw it to someone because it was the first person I ever worked for. And his name was Ray Lovejoy. And he was an editor who did 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Shining, Aliens, and the original Batman. And he was the first editor I ever worked with. And what I loved about him more than anything was that not only was he really creative and really just easygoing, but he was kind and he was really generous. And he wasn't someone who was like, felt like he was some high and mighty person. He literally, I was the PA on this movie, and he decided he was going to offer me a full like birthday party and gave me all these wonderful gifts and invited me into the editing room to watch him work at all times. You know, it was just that kindness and generosity, and then seeing how he was able to put things together. And then he would tell stories about Stanley Kubrick. I mean, how much better can it be?
Not much better.
Yeah.
Do you have a Stanley Kubrick story you can share?
Well, the only one I remember that really made me laugh a lot was that they would all have to get up, because everything was edited in Stanley's house. And so they would all be up at like 8 a.m. in the basement of Stanley's house, because that's where all the editing facilities were. And no one knew when Stanley was going to get up until the creaky pipes in the basement started to whir, because they knew that Stanley was drawing his bath. And so as soon as the creaky pipes went on, everyone started to get into motion and, all right, everybody get ready, Stanley's coming. And so then, you know, basically as soon as those pipes would go off, that was the doorbell for Stanley to arrive.
That's funny. And Emily, any of your earlier influences or current?
One of the earlier ones was definitely Verna Field. Jaws for me was that movie got me into making the films with my siblings, and that was one of the first ones that we did. And I just think I even rewatched Jaws recently for the 4th of July, and just the way that it's cut with the tension of the shark and not seeing the shark, and like having this fear when you're not seeing, you know, what's under the surface of the water. It fascinated me. And I think that the editing in that film still, it's just so good. So that to me is a big inspiration. And honestly, like Tim is a big inspiration for me editor wise. I've learned so much of what I know from Tim. He loves teaching, and his style is just, I think it's a fantastic style. I love it. I look up to him very much. And so a lot of the style and, you know, my approach to editing today comes from him. So
That's great.
Thank you.
I just watched Jaws the whole way through for the first time last week.
Whoa.
yeah,
And then they played Jaws 2, 3. Was there a 4? I don't remember.
there is a 4th one. It is not great, but there is one.
That's probably why you didn't remember.
Yeah.
I read that they couldn't get it to work. And that's one of the reasons why they made some of the editing decisions they did.
Yeah.
But like you said, though, it saved that movie. Editing saved that
Mhm.
movie.
Yeah, it did. It's pretty amazing.
And if you watch it, you don't miss it.
No.
There's still that suspense. There's still that action. Yeah, that's the magic and art of editing.
Yeah, exactly.
So I know Tim and Emily, you have a unique working relationship and mentorship. How has your working relationship and collaboration grown throughout the time that you've been working together?
I'm happy to say how it's grown because it's grown from a position where we were co-editors to a position where now Emily is on her own. And she has her own chair on Last of Us. And on Last of Us Season 2, she was her own editor, got to do episode 4, which was a spectacular episode of television. I mean, you can't even imagine how proud I am to see like someone just destroy an episode of television the way that she did in episode 4. So we were able to co-edit together, but then she also took the reins on episode 4. But what's happened now is that we still do what we always like to do, which is show each other everything we're working on, because what that does is it allows us to give each other really interesting sort of, here's what I think that I'm feeling, here's what I'm missing, here's, I like that, but, what if you did this, what if that, what if this, what if that? And then we internalize it, go back into our separate spaces now, and then we are able to move through that. And then we show it back again, and then it's like, oh yeah, that's more like it. Again, it's this collaborative spirit that it helps everyone, to be honest. Anytime you're working together with other editors, it's great to be able to hear their ideas and hear their input and get their sense of, what's working, what's not. So in terms of pure growth, it's been, obviously it's a huge step for Emily to be in that chair, and it will continue in season 3 with even more.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful partnership that Tim and I have. I mean, I remember back on The Resident when I was assisting for him, I would go over to him and he would always like welcome me. He's like, if you want to come and see how I do anything, let me know. So whenever I'd finish my stuff for the day, I'd go over to his office. I'd be like, I want to see how you cut this surgery scene. He'd let me sit in, and I'd sit in there for hours, and he would just explain like his thinking behind things. And we've grown so much since then, like you said, like to the co-editing, and now we edit separately. But I think what's really special is we're both able to communicate in this way where we don't take each other's notes personally in any way. Like we use them like as constructive notes. And I think that's a special place to be able to, do that, because, it's all about collaborating and hearing other people's viewpoints, hearing how people feel when they watch a scene. Are you confused? Are you bored? Are you scared? Like those things are important to know what other people feel. And it's a great way to adjust our work and to build on our work. So to have someone like that, who, I trust him so much when I show him a scene, like I love to get his feedback. And it's a really nice thing to be able to kind of ping ideas off of each other.
And it's never about like, you can do this better. It's about, well, how can the story be better? What I love about how Emily gives me feedback is she goes, this doesn't exactly feel like the character, of, for example, like Dina, because Emily was like the leader of Team Dina in season 2. So she knew the character backwards and forwards. And so it was helpful to me to have her say, everything is really great. However, in this specific instance, it started to feel a little bit not, but you look at the takes, tell me what you think, but this is what I was thinking. So all these little minute things are just there to help the characters be consistent, to help the story flow and emerge as best it possibly can. It's a great, way to work.
For people who aren't editors and maybe listening, can you break down how a co-editing would work on a single episode?
Sure. Emily, you want to start?
Co-editing, the way that it worked, at least for me and Tim, and other people might have different ways that they approach it, but we basically will have a call sheet every day. So we know what scenes are going to be coming in, and we would look at the scenes, we'd talk about them and see which scenes that we wanted to do. And what we kind of did was we would take kind of like through lines from the episode. So for the finale episode in season 1, I took a lot of the Marlene stuff. So I did the Marlene and the Anna stuff. I was able to do that through line. And then Tim took a lot more of the Joel stuff. So we kind of just try our best to do through lines when we can. And in the meantime, we're also like spreading out the work between us. So like one of us isn't having too many scenes to do. So it's kind of like a balancing act, but we just stay open-minded about, what we can do and kind of just communicate in that way.
Do you keep the characters then for other episodes if you kind of are more familiar with them, or it doesn't matter? You may share.
We would try to if we could. Definitely. Like I know that during season 1, Tim got most of the Tommy and Joel scenes. That was like a big through line that you got in season 1. That was great because he built that whole relationship. I think when we can, we definitely do. Yeah.
There's going to be someone who's going to be just so much more intimately aware of the nuances. And because if people aren't editors, we are looking at a gargantuan amount of material that the other editor is not looking at. So we literally have seen these characters behave in many, 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 many more takes than the audience will ever see. So we have this massive wealth of information and knowledge of how they behave that allows us to make sure, again, that these characters are being served in the very best way.
So you talked about how you work together and sort of balance that work and those decisions editorially. So how do you balance your voice as editors with the vision of the showrunner?
Oh, that's a good question. The cool part about our showrunner, Craig Mason, is that he thinks like an editor and he loves puzzles as well. So obviously the thing that is really nice is when he gives us feedback, he will give it to us in a way that makes sense as editors, but he won't tell us exactly what to do. He won't say, oh, take 5 frames off of that and let's investigate all these performances, blah, 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 blah. He'll say, okay, what I'm not feeling is this. I'm not feeling a sense that there's a dread from Dina in this moment. I wonder if you can go back into your tool chest and see if you can make me feel that on the next pass. And then when we do go back and do that, then maybe he'll say, okay, great. Now, a couple of little like line readings I want to double check, let's go and look at those. And so what we always are trying to do though, is we talk to each other. And so Craig will explain exactly why he wants a certain take. He doesn't just say, I like that one. He goes, I like this one. And you know why I like it? It's because of X, Y, Z, 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 and we go, oh, which then allows us to understand what he's thinking about how he's written these characters. And we go, oh, great. So then that actually informs us going forward. So the next time we see something, we go, oh, you know what? It would probably make sense to use this because that's what he liked in the past. So he talks out his notes in a way that makes us more informed about what he's looking for in the future.
Even though Tim and I are both working separately in a way when we're co-editing, doing our scenes, there's a cohesiveness there because we're always trying to just follow the story and Craig's vision, right? So like we're always putting story first. And I think since we both have a similar approach, then that's why everything kind of like goes together seamlessly.
Yep.
Have you ever gone back and looked at some of your early editing, and do you look at it and say, yes, that's good? Or now you look at it from your more experienced eye and say that I would totally edit that differently now?
I totally have done this, and I have had 2 experiences. One of the experiences is, wow, I did that back then, really? Which was really cool. Like I sometimes I'll look at old Gossip Girl episodes, which I can't believe I did, but I did. And I look at them and I go, wow, that is how did they pull that off? And then, right now, every teenager on the planet is always excited about that show. So I've watched that and seen that. But then there are other times where I look at something and I go, wow, if I had a chance to redo this, I didn't let this breathe at all. It's too choppy. What was I thinking? I mean, even with like someone giving me feedback, I probably should have thought about it in a different way. It's fascinating to look at something and go, I would redo this. And I think every time, a year or 5 years goes by, we'll look back at something and be like, yeah, I could have done that differently. And maybe it's because it's what happened at the time and we all agreed upon it at 4 a.m. and who knows what was going through our heads and what we needed to do to get things on. You never know, but I certainly have enjoyed the process of knowing that everything evolves and your instinct may not change as much over time, but your craft will change over time.
Yeah, I've gone through the same experience as what Tim was just talking about. I mean, we're constantly learning as we're working, and that's what's really fun about this job is I feel like every day I learn something new and learning from different people and learning different skills in Avid, whatever it might be. So, 5 years goes by, you've learned so much. You're going to always have different things you've taken away from different projects. So, yeah. I think that definitely looking back at stuff, I always am like, I wish I could adjust that or, change that performance or whatever.
Yep.
There are shows that you watch and you see an obvious, why did they choose that cut? It feels awkward or they're jumping to somewhere. I'm being a bit of a fangirl when I say this. There is not one moment in the show that feels out of place. It is perfection.
Wow, thank you.
To me,
Oh, nice.
to
Thank
me.
you.
That's amazing.
Because
Thank you.
when I get lost in something, and it's so many layers, right? The music, the acting, the set design, whatever. But the editing is the one place where you can slip out. If there's something that seems out of place, I could not pick what place.
That's amazing. And, that's so nice to hear because
And I'm not an
go,
editor.
yeah, but we
Okay.
go over this stuff again and again. And for us, it's like a tightrope, a high wire act. Emily and I are always saying, we cannot mess up for even a frame. We cannot be wrong. So everything has to lead from the previous. It has to propel the next shot. Why is this the next shot? Why here? Why now? And why exactly here versus 2 frames later? So it's truly like we pay so much attention to that. And we are horrible and we watch other things and we go, we'll never do that, So it's like, no. And also, thankfully, Craig has got a really great, strong sense of good craft editing. And one of the reasons I think Last of Us has been so successful in terms of, just the way the story evolves is we're very classical in terms of the way it's edited. It's very, very much like an old Hollywood movie. We're not playing with any sort of fast and frantic and speedy and tricky stuff because the world itself is so fantastical that you don't need to accentuate that. So the less you do, the more classical you do it, the more realistic that weird world starts to feel.
Yeah, and a lot of the scenes just too of just the landscapes, and I mean you like let it, either or both of you let it sit there for a minute so that the viewer can sort of take in, and then you do, like, you sort of look and you can see like a lot of the details of like some of the more, wider shots, say. You'll sit, for a certain amount of time before
Let it
you'll
breathe.
Yeah.
and that's a lot different than what mostly what we're seeing now. Everything's fast and fast
Yeah.
cuts, and yeah.
It's a lot of it is in environmental texture is what, a
Right,
lot of
exactly.
times they say. And
Right.
go ahead, Emily, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I
please.
was just going to
Sorry.
say the same thing,
Yeah.
basically. It's very atmospheric. We like sitting in those shots because then we can work with the sound and we can kind of set like our scene. And in season 1, we were in a lot of forest type places. We worked with a lot of different like bugs. Then in season 2, we had a lot of snow and different things. But it's nice to be able to work with the atmosphere and build our soundscapes. And, we're always talking about sound pockets. Like that's something I talk about a lot. So it's like if you have a scene where you're starting off and you have like kind of a long landscape shot, there's no dialogue, you might feel kind of a drop in energy, but then you start layering in these sounds and you maybe hear a distant bird or a distant dog barking and you hear like the wind. And so then you kind of have this like nice moment where you really feel like you're in the scene. I think it's a good way to set scenes up for sure. It's nice we're able to do that on this show.
Did you anticipate The Last of Us being so popular as you were working on it? And as the reviews started coming in and the show picked up more momentum, did you feel more and more pressure to stay at a certain level of work?
Emily, you start.
I don't think any of us expected the way that the first season would be received, as it was. We loved the first season. We loved it. We put everything we had into it. And I remember like working on it and Tim and I would be like, this is really good. Like we really love this. And we felt so connected to the characters. So that was our main focus when we were working on it. So to have people respond in a way where they were making this like beautiful fan art and just the reviews and the response, it was really unbelievable. But I think that kind of did set up, at least for me, for season 2, it does bring the pressure on. You want to bring your best efforts to continue working on this beautiful show that so many people love. And so, yeah, for me, I definitely felt some pressure to keep, bringing my best to the cutting room every day.
Yeah, for sure. The pressure was 10 times because now everyone was really looking at you and saying, oh, let's see if you can jump higher.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay. And so we had to keep jumping higher.
Yeah, and then we had some massive sequences in season 2 that were just like bigger than ever. Like episode 2, the amount of work that Tim did for episode 2, it's just incredible. Like every day I was watching the stuff he was doing and I was just like, this is amazing, so.
And terrifying to do because again, we were just like, it has to work. It has to be even better. But yeah.
And Tim, I noticed that you're producing more on this season, this more recent season. Can you talk a little bit about the 2 hats that you wear on the show? Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, it's something I've been doing for about 10 years now, actually. I actually love being a little bit more involved, if I can, with the producers in terms of the sound, in terms of the mixes, in terms of consistency. And Emily comes along with me in these things as well. But I started doing this about 2014 for Bad Robot, actually, in J.J. Abrams' company, where I was a supervising producer of post in the creative sphere. So I never touched a number, but I watched every edit of every editor, and I would give the first pass of notes, and then I would pass that along to the producers. And then anytime they would have sort of questions, oh, we're not feeling this, can you go in there and work on this section with this editor? That's something I would do. And then I would continue that work, sometimes in the world of visual effects in other shows, and then definitely on the sound mix stage, because for whatever reason, sound mixing is this incredible, incredible art that, again, is a high wire act. And the whole thing can fall apart when the sound doesn't work for one frame. And so Emily and I are both very, very consistent about being on the sound mix and go, you know what? I think this, I bet there was like a hammer drop in the background that you guys, replaced this one syllable with. And no, we have to find a way to make this work, because that syllable is actually really critical to the performance. And then we will make sure it goes back to the way we had it. And then we challenge the sound mixers to, can you remove that sound that's on top of that? Can you help us, bring this performance up? And then they usually can do that for us. But a lot of what I enjoy doing is taking pressure off of the showrunners and helping them have a creative sort of consistency as things go. I consider myself a bit of an insurance policy as well. If anything were to go wrong, I'm there to step in. It doesn't really go wrong on Last of Us because we have Emily and we have Simon Smith. So it's like, it's been really, really lucky that we have all these fantastic people, but it's really nice to be able to be there to make sure everything is moving very smoothly and everything is consistent.
Tim is like the glue in the post-production department on The Last of Us. So he definitely is kind of our through line for anything that comes up. Tim is our guy. And like he's talking about with sound design, like it might come down to the smallest of details that we point out or pick up on, but that's our job, is really in the details, whether it's picture or audio. We're so detail oriented. And so, we'll get down to like a sound and it could be like, oh, this sound is too low end. We really want it like high end, or it can be opposite, because, whether a sound is high end or low end can really affect whatever's happening in the moment. So it's nice to have someone like Tim that's so plugged in on those things to make sure that we do have that through line, and we do have that. It's kind of like, in a way, like quality checking all the episodes, making sure that we're all kind of, they're all following each other as far as the sound goes. And it's great to have someone like him on the show.
I remember one specific instance, like Bella Ramsey said a character's name in a different way in another episode. And I was like, oh, that's not the way that Bella Ramsey has been saying this in the past 4 episodes. We need to go back and we need to get Bella to ADR and loop the exact way that they performed it in the previous episodes. So that was one of those fun things. It's like, it's got to be right. Because again, in a weird way, I think that Emily and I are both like, we're the worst audience. We're like, when I say worst, I mean like we're the worst. Like we're going to try and, they're not going to get it past us. And, we're looking at things like, oh, this will be the moment where they all hate us. This is going to be where they hate us. This is going to be where they hate us. So we got to make sure it's perfect. They didn't say it right. So it's like, no. We're trying desperately to not have anything in the way, which hopefully, from what you were saying, Renee, allows everything to feel like it all makes sense.
And it's all in the name of story. We're always pushing forward for the story, for the best episode. And we're just as hard on ourselves, with our own work, with picture. And it's all just because I think both of us tend to be perfectionists, and I think it helps our work. And so we're always just doing the best we can to just get the episodes where they need to be.
Well, it shows.
Thank you.
Not that you needed me to say it, but
We'll take it.
in season 1, I have a favorite episode, which is the love story. That's episode 3.
3. Yeah. Long time.
I still think about it. In fact, when we were going to do this, I went back and watched it again, and it still holds up. I would say, and again, I'm going to be a fangirl, probably one of the best hours of television ever. in my mind. But there's so many other great episodes, so it's not like, but that one for me just stands out for so many reasons. The acting, the pacing, the way the story threaded, you know?
The intensity of the scene
Yeah, the intensity.
between the characters and throughout the scene held the entire time. Like for me too, you know. So
It's awesome. Yeah, no, we love that one.
You both edited that episode, right?
Tim edited it.
And yet I had a secret weapon alongside with me.
of course
And
you
that
did.
secret weapon was
So
Emily,
somewhere,
Yeah.
Emily's always somewhere.
who also edited several sequences in that episode because it was part of my plan to give her more responsibility, knowing how good she is at this. And so there are a lot of sequences there, including the last scene where Linda Rossat is playing on the cassette, and Emily did that whole sequence and with her putting the seatbelt on, and she's even like, we got to use this take because it's the best performance, but she didn't put a seatbelt on, so we're going to have to add visual effects seatbelt here. So, and they did.
Yeah.
They did, because they're like, well, I know that Bella forgot to put the seatbelt on, but it's got to be this performance. Sorry, guys. So, and it's the way it works. But yeah, that episode, specifically was the first one I had done, and it was very clearly, it was an echo of my own life, having been with my husband for now 24 years. So, and it was like this terrifying, beautiful script that Craig Mazin handed to me and literally says to me, I can't write better than this. And I'm like, okay. so he's like, just don't fuck it up. I'm like, thanks a lot. So
No pressure.
no pressure. But it was the way that it was filmed and the way that I was starting to edit it was unique in that I wasn't feeling the need to edit because a lot of it was taking place in these two shots. And a lot of the scenes made more sense if you saw both characters in the same frame together. And so that was what was allowing these characters to start to feel connected and to feel more like their love was growing, that we could see them in the same frames together. So each edit started to have more power anytime it happened because there were so few of them. And I'm really grateful that you said that you love the pacing, because this is the longest episode that, was a solo episode. The pilot episode being longer was actually 2 episodes that we combined. But this is the longest solo episode of season 1 at 74 minutes. And I'm always a big believer that pace is not about speed. Pace is about investment and interest. And so if the audience is interested, they could be sitting there for hours. And as long as they're interested in what's happening on the screen, it doesn't matter. So that's what pacing is. And so I think a lot of what happened on that episode was artful deletion of certain things that didn't need to be there. But mostly we allowed the romance to play almost as is, because it was such a powerful sequence. And most of the sort of the bookends of the Joel and Ellie section were where a lot of time came out of the original runtime of the episode. It was 1 hour and 36, I think, and then it came down to 74 minutes. But it's a beautiful episode, and the performances of Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett are what drove the whole thing. So
Yeah.
they gave so much. And I know that when I spoke to them, he was so generous with Nick in explaining to him, like, let me help you with this. Let me tell you a story. Let me, help you understand this. And Nick was such he's such a gentle person to begin with, and such a collaborative person no matter what. He was literally going out with the grip guys and the crew guys and helping them move things at times. He's like, hey, how can I help? Because that's the kind of guy he is. So for that character to emerge from him, that sensitive person who's also completely blocked himself off from love. And I think that's what people respond to, is someone who has believed that I can't be someone who experiences love. It's not for me. And then to have someone come into his life and allows him to feel that, and then to actually, give in to the risk of loving someone else, which it was a risk, because, all of a sudden things started to happen. And he's like, if I fall in love with this person, then I have to defend him. Then I'm going to feel horrible when that person is gone. I don't want to deal with these things, but he does it anyway.
There were moments where it wasn't perfection, but in that non-perfection, it was perfection, because that's what love is.
Yeah.
It is arguing. It is not agreeing, but then moments of sweetness, and those
Yeah.
were threaded in there, and it's just a great episode.
Yeah, no,
Really.
I'm so happy you feel that way. We're so proud of that one.
You both should have won an Emmy for that episode. Let me just say that. But you did.
We did
we
win
did-
one for 5.
I know. I was getting in the segueing into that. Okay.
Yes, I agree with her.
And luckily Emily was on that one as a credited editor, so that then it actually worked. So
Right. So you both
But-
won the Emmy for the
for number 5.
for Endure and Survive, right? So
Correct.
could you talk a little bit about that and your process and working with the ASL actor?
Oh yeah.
What was that like?
I'll start with the ASL and then I'll
Okay.
pass over to Emily. The ASL actor was incredible, like beyond, like nominated for an Emmy himself.
He was great.
Yeah, he was found in the middle of Maryland because Craig couldn't find anyone, and he literally just put out a tweet and said, "Hey, I'm looking for someone, and I can't find them, and if there's anyone out there in the world," and then he shows up, and he was just absolutely stunning. And then we had someone who was from sort of the ASL consultant on set who was making notes for every single take so that we knew which takes were the ones that were correct ASL and which ones were also like, it's a little off, but it's okay. It's like, this one can work. And so one of the things that I would do, and this is the character of Sam, is I would watch all of the performances for emotion, and then I would look at them for the ASL correctness. And I would make sure that if there was a problem with the ASL, I would ask further, like, okay, is this portion okay? And then you get back a response, yeah, that'll actually work. And most of the time what happened was they would allow us, if it was more emotional, if the performance is more emotional, they say, stick with the emotion. So because in the end, it's going to be about the emotion of how that character is feeling. But in terms of working in that style, it was just really, it was unique. It was almost like working with a foreign language. So that you don't know. And I'm looking at these hand signals. I don't know what they mean, but I'm relying on other people to tell me what they mean. And of course, putting up the generators, we had to make sure that all of those chirons match what was being expressed. And, having recently watched the film, oh my gosh, what was the film that had the ASL in it that won the Oscar? Coda previously to that, and seeing how brilliantly they did that. It was just, it was a really interesting and another challenge to the episode to make it work for the viewer. And a lot of it was in keeping the silences between the characters, because it was, you were allowed to really feel their energy between each other because there were no words, because it was all being done in gestures. So a lot of that sort of the building of the character was due to the fact that there was no dialogue. It was all in a nonverbal connection.
That episode in general was really special because Sam and Henry were very important characters to both me and Tim. And I remember talking with Tim and knowing that their death scenes were coming in this episode. And it's like, we've run into this a lot in this show, is like we become so connected to these characters and just emotionally. And even though they don't exist, they feel real to us because we're constantly making them real on screen and we're adding in details and building these characters. And so when you know that you have to kill these characters off, in a way, it is heartbreaking. So that episode, it's a beautiful episode because, again, like they're really special characters to us. And like Tim was saying, it was challenging in the way of, having to do scenes with pure emotion alone. But we were so lucky with the actors that we had, and they did such an incredible job. And also in that episode, the other challenge that we had was just, and Tim can talk about this more, but we had this massive battle scene with an incredible amount of footage. And how long do you think you worked on that scene?
The battle scene, probably about 2 weeks to get that in its first position. And then working with Craig, and again, he's just so smart when it comes to, he's like, yeah, but it all has to make sense. It can't just be a bunch of people running around and shooting weapons.
That was
every
incredible.
shot has to make sense for the story. So we would go through it with a fine tooth and say, oh, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? And if we were going to break it up with something, it's like, how does that help the audience understand the stakes of what's going to happen to our characters? So I remember there was a certain moment where one of the soldiers decides to get rid of the 5 infected that are around him. He's going to just shoot himself. And in doing so, we'll get rid of the other 5. And basically by showing that, He says, well, that's good because that'll allow our characters to feel more at threat by seeing what a soldier will do to get rid of these infected.
Yeah.
So a lot of it was trying to figure out how to make that all happen. But yeah, it took about, oh my gosh, 2 weeks to get that. And, Emily and I both do these action sequences now. She did a subway sequence in season 2, episode 4, which was incredible as well. And it's like we watch through every single moment, and then we create these little sequences and then subsequences of action and try and come up with the very best version of how to tell the story. And, they're rolling cameras, 4 cameras at a time, sometimes maybe 5, and little tiny pieces will just be right there. And they're just these beautiful, elegant, story-based pieces. And we go, oh my gosh, we have to pull that out and make sure that that finds its way in there, because I'm sure that directors are not seeing these things because they're trying to watch 6 monitors at a time. And so it's our job to watch through everything, create all of these little reels, and try and come up with a version of the puzzle, as it were, that is the most elegant and the most efficient and the most emotional.
I mean, I think that's the biggest key is like knowing the footage. Like that's our job. And it's interesting too, because we'll go through so many different versions of these scenes, right? So like the battle sequence we were just talking about in episode 5, season 1, I know that eventually you got to a point with Craig where Craig was like, oh, I would really like to see the Joel Ellie thread be the forefront of this scene. And so then Tim was able to do a version where that was like one of the main thread lines in the scene, because obviously we have so much footage. Sometimes it's hard to tell, like, where do we want to stay? And so Craig is able to come in, give us his vision. And then because we know the footage, we'll be like, oh, okay, well, we have this. So it's kind of just like this constantly evolving thing. And for the subway sequence in season 2, we had a lot more cars that they actually went through, but Craig wanted to kind of compress the time. He wanted it to be quicker. So then I was like, okay, well, maybe we try this, kind of the highlights and the different selects that I'd gone through and pulled, and like kind of, getting those moments in there. So knowing the footage is a huge help with any kind of notes, but actually going through and like doing the work of like making selects makes all the difference when you get notes, being able to like quickly, implement them.
Well, speaking of killing off characters or having characters die,
How many?
I was
Too many.
Too many. Speaking of Joel, I mean, that crushed me. That must have been intense for you guys.
It was.
Yeah.
It was very intense. Well, it was intense to watch Bella Ramsey perform that over and over and over and
Gosh,
over.
she is
Beyond.
unreal.
Yeah, beyond.
Really.
So, and Emily and I both love this about Bella. At the end of every take, tears pouring down their face, smiles to the camera and says, I'm okay, guys.
Oh.
I'm okay. So it's really incredible to watch them work, because that's what they're doing, is they're working. So, and they're doing such a beautiful job that I believe that they're experiencing something incredibly human. Then making a decision on how to put it together in such a way that it's not just screaming and yelling. Again, it's like Craig was like, well, Ellie can't just be screaming the whole time because that's useless. Let's design an arc for the character to try and get Joel free. And let's go through the performances and now try and find a performance that does the following things. And so we developed this arc for Ellie where at first it's like it was pure shock and screaming, but then it turned into, no, that isn't working. Let me be a little bit more quiet about it. And maybe if I'm quiet, maybe the temperature in the room will come down. No, that's not working. Okay, now I have to focus on Joel again and I have to get him up. So let me do that. Oh, that's not working either. And then it was, okay, getting to Joel is not going to work. Now I have to pivot, and now I can only speak to Abby, which I hadn't done at all. And I have to start pleading. As opposed to yelling at Abby, now I have to plead. So a lot of it was figuring out how to craft this arc that made Ellie smart, and not just like flailing about on the ground. And so it makes it so much worse that perhaps, Ellie could have stopped this, but in the end couldn't. As smart as she was and as much as she tried to do, that there was never a chance to save him. And maybe that's what made the sequence hurt as much as it did, because it was like, you thought maybe it was going to work and it just didn't.
As bad as you felt for Bella to watch Joel watch her, knowing that what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And then you could read that on his face.
Oh, yeah. No, it was almost like, I wish you weren't here because I knew what my fate was going to be, and now I have to watch you see it. So,
yeah.
And I know my fate. So,
yeah, it was a great scene. hard to watch, like
Yep.
Joelle said. The scene that I really liked from this season was the guitar falling in love scene. So serene and unexpected. You don't know really before then that he taught her guitar. You knew at the exact moment they fell in love. It's a great scene.
Oh, thank
That's
you.
Emily.
Yeah, that
Maybe I just love the love scenes. I don't know.
love scenes are great. Love scenes are my favorite too. So I get it. I luckily was able to cut that scene, and
It's amazing. Great job.
thank you.
Honestly.
It was so fun to get to do it. It was one, in the game as well, so I knew people would be excited about it. And we had a great director on that episode, Kate Herron, and she and the actors, they just did a great job. And we had lots of different footage, and there was a version we had done where we used a lot more close-ups, and then Craig kind of gave this note. He was like, I want Dina and Ellie to be connected. So we kind of did a lot of overs you'll see in the scene. If like during like the first at least half of that scene, we're all in these connecting overs, which is nice because it connects them, and you feel it when you're watching it. And then as we start moving closer, it kind of allows you to like punctuate more of the emotion, and you see Dina falling, and it's a very special scene. I love it as well.
And one of the cool things that Emily did, and I'm going to totally like toot her horn here, is that at the very end, she puts in a shot of the guitar at the very end after everyone has left. And that moment is Joel is right there.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things that in any other show they would never allow you to do. What is that? What is that? Keep going, move fast it. But instead, it's the memory of who was there. And to be able to put that in was something I wouldn't have thought of, I'm sure. And so for her to figure that out and for everyone to recognize sort of the brilliance of that was, I just loved it.
That's a really cool moment. And Craig had it scripted as well, like that Joel was there, that we have this presence. And so to be able to take the time, like it's great that we're able to take the time on the show and to breathe and to have those moments and sit with that emotion. And yeah, it is beautiful. So.
And I'm going to do something crazy right now. Sorry for the viewers at home, but this is Emily on the set of that moment.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That
Yeah.
set design was great.
It was so
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, you could actually walk up the steps and be up there, and Tim and I were able to go and visit it because we were editing on the second floor, and then they had the soundstage below for a lot of the scenes, not all of them, but a lot of them. So yeah, that one was there.
I was like, Emily, we have to get a photo here.
Yeah,
So
it was great.
yeah.
Since you kind of brought it up, being allowed to have these moments, has there ever been a time in your editing career where you had to fight for a shot or fight for a scene in the way that you think that it should go, and the showrunner or the director came in and said, "Ooh, no"?
Well, there's
That's
one
a good question. Yeah, go ahead.
I
go
feel
ahead,
like
sorry.
at least like for me, I tend to like to just hear the feedback of the director, the producer, and do my work based on what they're telling me, in a collaborative way. But I can think of an example that's interesting because sometimes you'll do work that won't be used at the time but might be used later. So for instance, in season 1, Tim cut that ending scene with Joel and Ellie looking down at Jackson. And at the very end of that sequence, the way that it's cut now in the final show, we cut on Ellie's face. We cut out after Ellie's face of her saying, okay, because she says to Joel, was everything you told me true? And he says, yeah. And she's like, okay. And then we end. But Tim had actually cut it where you see them walking away. And so there was like this discussion whether we should use it or not. We ended up not using it. But then we start season 2 with it. So it came back. When we actually see them like walking away after the conversation, walking towards Jackson. It's a small thing, but it's like still like sometimes we'll put things in that we think like this might be cool. We're going to try it. We have it. We want them to see it. But I think a big part of being an editor is being able to take feedback, take notes, and being able to, create something new. I personally don't think I've ever argued to fight to keep something strongly, but I don't know about you, Tim.
No, it's tough because like, again, we are so lucky that we have Craig Mazin on this because he just has exquisite taste. And it's just great to be able to, and again, he was the one who was like, yeah, no, let's do it like this. And then immediately in his mind, he was like, I'm going to start season 2 with that because that is Joel's perspective and it's perfect. So we could just do that. So it's no big deal. He's playing the chess in his head way ahead of everything. And in the end, we're trying to make the story that they want to tell the best it can possibly be. I will suggest strongly at times. I will give you an example in episode 2. I was very much a big believer that, oh gosh, this is going to be horrible. I'm sorry, guys. But after Joel has died and Ellie has to crawl over and be with him, it was much longer in those moments. And I loved that. And I loved the idea of it being quiet, because there was something about the lack of sound and the lack of any kind of guidance for the audience to force them to be in that moment with that character without the sound of Joel. That the sound of Joel is not there anymore, that Joel is dead. And for it just to be the sound of the fire, the wind, and the exhales of Ellie. And then for a long period of time, the producer said, no, it's too much, it's too much. Once they grab hands, it's enough. We don't want to stay any longer. And every so often, I would just sort of, nicely say, oh, we're still going to keep this the way it is with the hand. We still like that. Do we like that still? I kind of miss the other way, but that's what you guys want. That's what you guys want. It's cool. So, and they're like, yeah, that's what we want. And then about 5 times later, they're like, what if we add a little bit more to that? I go, okay, yeah, sure. So like a little squeaky, I don't like to try and fight for things, but I kind of like throwing a little squeaky wheel and saying, I think you want to relook at this, and maybe this will come back. And I will do that here and there. In the past, I have had to do that a lot more when I didn't have people that I necessarily fully trusted. But most of the time, I've trusted most of the people I've worked with. And I've been really lucky that way. But a lot of it is, I'm trying to give them the most elegant solutions for the story and most sophisticated. So a lot of times it's about music. I can't believe I'm saying this. I was like, do we need music? I think you've done well. And I don't think you need to accentuate this with music. And they'll say, no, we need music here to tell everyone how to feel. I'm like, do you? Because I think you've done it with the performances and the writing and everything. And if we're trying to tell the audience how to feel, then maybe you're not confident that we're doing our jobs. So a lot of it is me just trying to say, do you really think you need this? And I just try and throw it into their minds and let it marinate. And again, like what Emily said, we'll just say, are you sure about that?
Yeah.
So
a nice
in a collaborative way.
Yeah, exactly. You sure about that? We're all about the collaboration. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
All about the story.
all about the story.
What's one behind the scenes fact or detail that fans would love to know about the editing process or the series in general that you can tell our audience?
That's a good one. Behind the scenes process. We are ruthless with creating shots that didn't exist. For example, we will remove characters in a frame where they were, we will throw it back to them, shorten things where they took too long of a pause, but we're like, sorry guys, this takes too long. So Last of Us, even though it looks like everything is happening exactly as it did, it is usually because Emily and I are ruthless. And we are like, no, this part of the frame has to be this way. So most of the time when you watch an offline of Last of Us, you'll see these crazy sort of split images that haven't been, fixed just yet. And then because we're basically like creating a pace that never existed. And so that's one of the things I think that people would be interested in is that, what you see is not what they did. What you see is what we did.
Cool.
Yeah, we do use a lot of split frames. Tim is right. I am always going to our VFX department and being like, can we do this, please? Because, but yeah, we do use those. I think that's probably one of the best behind the scenes look.
Yeah.
Now it's time for our speed round. These are like quick fire answers. So question 1, what are you watching now? And are you passionate about TV viewing?
Emily, go.
When I'm not working, I watch a lot of reality TV. I am able to close my mind off and just enjoy it. And the thing that I just watched recently with my girlfriend was The Queer Ultimatum on Netflix, the season 2. And we're also rewatching Killing Eve, which is not reality. Killing Eve, the scripted show. We just started rewatching that show is great. We just watched the pilot today, actually, and the pilot is it's amazing. The characters in that show, I really, really love that show.
And I'm watching Hacks. I watched Hacks.
Okay.
I love Hacks. Watch the studio. I'm constantly, of course, watching any Drag Race version. I don't care how many versions they do. I will always watch them. And then I weirdly just watched, of all things, on the plane getting back to the U.S. the other day, I watched The Apprentice with Sebastian Stan as Trump. Because it was it was directed by one of our Last of Us directors, Ali Abbasi, who did the finale of season 1. And wow, that was something.
Yeah.
So that's all I'll say.
Okay.
Did either of you see Adolescence?
Yes. Loved Adolescence.
Unbelievable.
One shot. I was like, yeah, that's it. They're not doing what we do. They're certainly not doing what we do.
Yeah.
It's all in one.
If editing was a competitive sport, what would be your signature move?
Oh my God. Competitive sport signature move would be the early exit, the fast exit.
Okay.
So get out before you've stayed too long. So I would do the chop. So it's the editing chop.
Match frame. A match frame comes just matching in and then checking out that clip. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, back to Joelle.
If you could be any mythical creature, what would you be and why?
A gay dwarf, because that's what I was in our Dungeons and Dragons game in season 1 of Last of Us. I was a gay dwarf named Burley McFierce. And so I would love that because it was really fun to play. So, and that was a great mythical character.
I was a lesbian vampire on that game, and I would also choose that because why not?
Yeah. So
If you were stuck in The Last of Us, what character would you be?
I would go with Dina. I would want to be Dina because I love how practical Dina is. I love how Dina's always thinking about other people and thinking like, how can I help this person do this? And I just love how strong she is. I don't know. There's something about the character of Dina that I would love to be.
Yeah, I think Dina's a really solid answer. I like Tommy. I don't know. Something about being Tommy, hanging out in Jackson. I feel like that's a pretty good place to be.
Yeah, we like gender swap there. I love that. That was
Wow.
cool.
Can you recall the first time you watched something and realized, oh, editing matters?
It's a tough one, but I would have to say,
That should be like a series. Oh, editing matters.
oh, editing matters. Yeah. The more you know. I don't want to give it away, but it's like I remember seeing, all right, this was it was several decades ago. I remember seeing a great editor and it was a terrible film and then a great film with a terrible editor in the same weekend. And I was like, oh, wow, that is insane because that movie could have been so much better and it would have been a classic. However, the editing, I could just feel it. I was like, the editing is just so poorly done. And yet the story was so good. And yet the movie with the really great editor and a bad story, the editing was like, made it work. But I'm like, wow, if it was just for the editing and the other one, it would have taken it to the next level. I mean, obviously I'm a Star Wars kid, so I grew up with that. And so watching how Paul Hirsch was able to navigate, and Marshall Lucas and Richard Chew navigate and knowing now in retrospect that there's a scene in Star Wars where Luke Skywalker and Ben Kenobi are talking about what he's going to do and are you going to follow your heart and etc. And they had to restructure the whole thing because the way it was designed is they did the Princess Leia hologram first in the scene when they realized it should be the last thing that they should do because that's where the plot propels into the next sequence. And the way they did it is they had these silent reactions between the two characters. And I remember how much those silent reactions made me feel for the characters. And that was their sneak route to get them between these two sections. And that's when I was like, you know what? Editing can do anything. It can move things anywhere. It's so plastic that you can just recreate a scene in a way that theater just cannot do.
I was inspired by a lot of horror films growing up. I think horror, like just the idea of like tension and music and scares, jump scares, all those things. It was very clear to me from early on how much the editing was involved. And I also think there's a movie called Drop Dead Gorgeous. It's a comedy, but that was in the 90s, this movie, and it's like a documentary style. And something about that movie growing up, I watched it so many times, and the editing style in that, they cut it like a documentary, but to me, watching that, just the way they do the music and the cuts, like it really is, that movie, I think, relies a lot on its editing and it, it's a wonderful cast, but I think that movie inspired me a lot too.
Each episode, we have a segment called Question Down the Lane where we ask a guest to provide a question for the next guest. And our last guest has a question for the both of you. Who is your first celeb crush?
Mine is Michael Scheffling from 16 Candles. I was just like, oh my God. I was like completely beyond infatuated with this person. He played Jake. And I ended up marrying a tall, dark, and handsome man. So what are you going to do?
And mine was definitely Lucy Lawless and Xena. Could not get enough of Xena growing up. Still have a crush on her now.
Thank you both for joining us. It was a really fun conversation.
you
meet
for your
both of you.
time.
Thank
your
you guys
time.
so much.
Yeah. Nice to see you again.
We'll be watching what you edit next.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and share Podcetera. And be sure to follow and like the series wherever you enjoy podcasts.
For Podcetera, I'm Renee Lego.
And I'm Joelle Ludovich. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.